Hello and welcome back to Crafty Magic Arts. Today we're going to be making something a little different than what I've been making lately, although not a far stretch from what I usually make. So let's jump right into it. Alright, let's get started. This is a toy that I picked up from Value Village for I don't remember how much because it was in a bag of toys, but pretty cost effective. It's a cute toy. It's not my favorite. I think the head is really nice, and that's what I'm going to use. From looking it up, it seems like this was a Fisher Price toy that came in sets. It was meant to be like ridden by another character. That's why the side's all pinched. But it's not for me. It's not what I want, and not even my kids would be interested in it. It's not the type of toy that really is loved in our house, so it's going to be remade, and that's what I'm going to do. So jumping right back into it, I decided to sketch what I want to do with it. I do want to utilize most of the parts with the exception of the body, so I first take inspiration from the head, and then decide I want to make like some sort of serpent creature. Now, I do put it as a serpent here. I actually am inspired to make something like what's called an Ogopogo, where I live, there is a mythical lake monster, and I'd love to eventually make that. I will say that's not where this goes, but it was inspired by it. Now here I am tearing this piece apart. This was painful. That looked easy. It was not. It took me forever to break this piece apart, but I did manage to get all the pieces I wanted off of it. And as you saw, I did toss the body aside. I also don't need the horns. I have no intentions of using those in this project. So using my picture here, I actually put out the pieces. I decided I want to use the back legs, which again, doesn't work well for the Ogopogo concept, but it does work well for some sort of dragon. So I want to actually make this. I have my wire out, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist it. I learned hack, use a drill. Works much better than your hands, and makes a lot tighter coil. Now using the length of wire I got here, I am going to now form it into the shape that I'd like, which is the dragon shape. It's squiggly, it's a line, it squiggles. It's not fancy. But to bulk it out, I am going to use some aluminum foil here. A little hack I learned is actually it makes it a little easier to put foil onto things as if you crumple it first and then apply it. It works really, really well. It actually adheres a lot better. But I also have arms on this little beast, so I add the arms, and then I am going to tape it down. So I also learned a hack that if you're going to sculpt something, use tape. It holds it all together. So I use a lot of it, a lot of painter's tape. And now just to make sure the aluminum foil is really tight, I use my pliers just to squeeze down on it in different areas, and then I can move on to the next piece. So here I am, I'm pulling out my clay. I actually have some old polymer clay here that I never use. I never use colored clay. I picked it up a long time ago, inspired by I think like Sugar Charm Shop or something like that, which was awesome to make like miniatures. That's not my thing, so instead I use it here. You can see I use a variety of colors, just to build it out. It's going to be fully covered. It's not meant to be colored, but it works. Here I am pressing in the legs to have a spot for them, as well as the tail and the neck. After this is fully baked, they'll be able to be just slotted right in. Now I'm going to take my sanding bag, which I set up so I have somewhere to keep the dust particles, and I sand away the texture that's actually on the body. I do plan to add texture myself, and I didn't want to have the existing texture interfering, so I'm sanding it off slowly, very, very slowly, but surely. I love how quickly this all looks. It's not quick, but here we go. It's done and ready to go. Now the body has been baked, so now I'm just going to make sure that I glue in all the pieces I can right now, which is just the legs, and I'm also going to do the tail as well in a second here. There we go. And the neck. Hey, there you go. But the arms aren't ready. I don't like the claws. I want to change them. They have like this weird like two claws, like one lower claw and one upper claw. It wasn't flying for me. So I decided to cut that off and make my own. Now, I show something pretty fancy here, some wire claws. I was really inspired by Delightful, where she makes like these really cool hands. I had every intention of doing it. It just didn't work out. So don't love those. It's not going to stay. Good ideas. Yeah, not forever. So now I'm going to trim around the leg to make sure it fits more in line with the body. I don't want to add any additional bulk. I actually want to slim things down. I want to have everything kind of mesh together. You know, make sure it all flows nicely, because he's meant to be like more serpentine, even though he's technically going to be dragon-esque. And here he is. He's perfect, all done. I can call it wraps. Perfect, absolutely perfect. No more work to be done. Ha, this is like a 30-minute video, I think. So now I'm actually filling in all the gaps with some hot glue. I love hot glue for that. I use it a lot. And even in the top of the head, it had this weird divot. I figured might as well fill that in because I'm planning on doing other things with that anyways. And here he is, looking pretty snazzy. And now we bring out the epoxy sculpt, my favorite. Now I'm doing a ton of modifications. I know I kept the head because it was what inspired it, but honestly it wasn't giving me the vibes I wanted. I moved away from the Ogopogo as soon as I added the legs, so I decided I wanted the whole head to be different. So I re-sculpted his entire head on top of the existing head, which is why I love epoxy sculpt. So I started making little creases, bigger nose, more broad head, and of course a big chin. I have a purpose for that. There's a reason I made a giant chin, but oh yeah, so different, but it changes the entire look of this piece. He looks more dragon-like, less serpentine. Pleased as punch. Now with more epoxy sculpt, I continue to model him. I'm adding it into the creases of his arms. I want to build that out a little bit too. I want to make it, again, look like the pieces are actually meant to be together, not two distinctly separate pieces. The clay was a good idea, but I still have to add a lot to make sure all the pieces flow in together. And would you look at that? I added a new claw. There you go, though. Claws are gone. One of the reasons I actually did switch this off is one, the wire wasn't working the way I wanted, but two is actually I realized the back claws had 3 claws, not 4 or 5 in this case. I didn't like how different they were. I wanted him to be more in line, so I got rid of the wire and I added the new claws. And here you can actually see I have 2 separate claws. Now we're going back to Sculpey, but this is Bacon Bend. Now, I was really clever. At least I thought I was. I failed miserably, but I felt like I was clever. I took some Bacon Bend, which is actually one of my very favorite clays, but it's also really old. I haven't used it in a very long time, and I thought, I'm going to make spikes with Bacon Bend because that means if they get hit, they'll be less likely to break. That doesn't make any... Epoxy sculpt is super strong. Honestly, I just thought I wanted to use up this clay, and epoxy sculpt is very expensive, and I already have this clay, and yada, gotta use it up, you know? So I'll make all the spikes and stuff like that on him, and then remove them, because I can't put them in the oven anymore, because all the pieces are attached, and then bake them, and then reattach them. That part actually went very well. You can see I'm making them. It's a little fiddly. I'm sure I could have made better spikes with epoxy directly on the piece, but I was really excited to try this new method because I haven't done it in a long time or anything like that. And here's all the spikes, and there they are, ready to be baked, or already baked. They might have, yeah, they're already baked, ready to go. So now all I gotta do is adhere them. Easy, right? You'll see in a bit why that doesn't work, but let's pretend it works for now. And here we go, got a new bottle for my super glue. That also failed miserably. For some reason, the glue gets stuck in the little nozzle, thinking I'm all clever. Again, I thought I was clever. The nozzle got clogged, and then it became a whole thing, and yeah, it doesn't work either. But that's okay. It works at this moment in time, and that's great. One thing you'll notice is actually there's 2 sets of spikes on the back. I actually have a purpose for this. I'm really excited about it, and I'd like to show you when I get there. But there's a purpose. There's 2 rows of spikes there, and I think it's really cool. Now I want to continue with the epoxy sculpt, and actually I'm going to be sculpting around the spikes eventually, and making sure they also blend into the rest of the piece. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Working around each spike to, again, make it blend in. Like I said, I probably could have just made the spikes out of epoxy, considering I have to blend them in anyways. But, you know, it worked really well as far as in theory goes, and it ended up looking good when I was working on it as well. You can see here all the pieces are getting blended in. I'm actually making a little figure 8 there to go around 2 spikes at once. Feeling all cool. And yeah, continuing with that on the head as well. Making sure that all flows into his forehead. I do want to continue to keep those creases that I already have, making sure his brow lines are a little bit more distinguished from the rest of him. After all the spikes are done, I also want to make sure that I do the horns and blend them in. I'm actually adding a lot more epoxy onto his head, which again, I have to continue to finesse around the pre-existing thing. Here the glue actually did hold, so I add a little more, and then I add more epoxy. Honestly, the epoxy is going to hold these spikes on really well. They're not going anywhere. They are well held on. Now smoothing out all the transitions here, and the piece is finally coming together. Wait, what's that? Is it scales? Oh yes. Using my silhouette cutter, I actually am getting prepared to do scales. I'm trying to use my little picky thing here. It does not work, so I just like scrape them off and scoop them up. I have two different sizes of scales here that I do manage to get on into like individual little cups, and you can see them right here. I got the big scales, which aren't that big. I got the small scales, which are really small. I got the belly scales, which are long, and then I prepare to actually put them onto the dragon. I want to start with something simple, so we're going to work on the belly first, although I need my trusty dusty foam and second piece of foam to balance them up, and I get right on planning the belly scales. So what I do is I just simply place one on and then layer it all the way up from the tail up to the chest. And here you can see it's done. Like, I don't go any higher than that. There's a reason for that. But it took a while, but honestly, it worked so good. I used hot glue for that. Now, I want to try something different using the regular scales, so I decided that I want to use some glue all. And I love glue all. This project was a lot of like, not sure what I'm doing, so I spread on some glue all, and I'm getting ready to place some scales. I don't know why I'm trying to do with that. Oh, there we go. Now I'm clever. I use like this diamond tool picker upper with the scales, and it worked really well, but not with that glue. Nope. Back to trusty hot glue. One little glob there, and then place it on. And then another little glob, another little glob, another little glob, and we just continue. And this is what I was alluding to. The horns breaking. Now, I only show this happening once or twice during this video. It happened so much. Like, even on the tiny scales, this clay had no bend. It had all break. Just pressure. So after that's all fixed, I move back to the scales, and you can see how far I've made so far. And now I'm back, and here is a leg. Now, it took forever. Why am I petting? I'm just petting. Okay, I really like it. So now moving on to the next leg. Again, just one after another, and it's looking pretty good. Let's do a snap, and oh, I lost my gloves. I lost them. Where did they go? I don't know. There they are. I'm so clever. I'm hilarious. Yeah, so the scales are being done. This is a very slow process. Did it take me multiple nights? Absolutely. Did I curse myself for doing this? Absolutely. Many times. And why did I decide I had to do teeny tiny scales on the feet and legs? I don't know, but I love the texture it brings. And even though it's driving me crazy putting on every single scale, it's worth it. It's worth every single scale. I move on to the big ones eventually, and you can just see it, like how it transforms this dragon. It goes from just basic worm to a dragon. Like, look how cool that looks. Oh my gosh. Still some work to do, and I just keep going. As you can imagine, I did film it all, but watching them all be placed be really tedious and boring. So here is a little bit of what I've worked on. It's looking really nice. I've worked on most of the big scales, and it's time to move on, and there it is. Finally, all the scales are done. I don't do it all over the face, and it's a little darker in color because I actually covered it in some spray varnish to protect the paper so it doesn't absorb as much. Because this is chipboard, like it is paper, stronger than paper. But yeah, that's why it's a little darker in color. So now on to wiping it down. What am I doing? Oh, more epoxy sculpt. Oh, right. This is where I get really sick and tired of having to glue on those spikes those horns so many times. Spikes, horns, you name it, I broke them all. I had so many cracks. So I have decided to cover them all because they're not strong enough. I need to fix that. So even though I just spent a ton of time scaling it all, that's actually when it broke, because every time I moved it, if I lightly tapped the horns or spikes, they would break. So I cover them all. Like I'm done. The big horns get it. This is protecting also the existing cracks, because it's gonna break over time, and I just can't have that. I've spent way too much time on this piece. I've invested a lot of hours, like hours, putting all the spikes on the scales, making this piece come to where it is now, and I'm not about to lose it because I was a little cheap, to be honest, at the beginning, where I just wanted to use up what I already had. For future, I will still use this clay, but for something that is like underneath, like the body, where I made the body, where it's never going to be like, it's going to be covered in other things anyways or something like that. I don't know if I'm even going to use it, to be honest. I don't want to risk anything, but yeah. I cover all of them in epoxy sculpt and spend a little extra time on it. It's not as much epoxy sculpt if I would have created them from scratch, but still. Now the yellow clay that we used to know and love is gone and covered in epoxy sculpt, and I gotta wait another 24 hours for it to dry. But that time has passed, and here I am with a small mock-up of what I want to do with the coloring. I've decided I want to go more green, and I want to really go bright with the mane. There it is. That's what the big chin, the blank neck, and the back is all about. The mane. I've decided this guy has to have a long mane, and I needed colors to work with that. So I actually looked up online a color palette. I tweaked it slightly and to match the colors I had at home, and I need to get prepped for it. First, I want to add some gesso, and I add a little bit of Mod Podge in it just so it actually continues to hold the scales. I do think gesso on its own would have done that, but I feel like Mod Podge just gives it a little extra bite, and now the scales are going nowhere at all. They're sticking on that beautiful little dragon. Gotta make sure I get in all the crevices. With layers upon layers of scales, you gotta work to get all the paint in there. But here I am, actually, I'm gonna move the painted dragon off to the side. I'm gonna start cutting the mane. Now, honestly, the color here, the bright green, was the cornerstone of my color palette. I decided I wanted that bright green, it was gonna happen. And it just so happened I had a yellow green in my arsenal ready to go. This is actually one of my good, I think they're called So Flat, the golden matte acrylics. I love them, like single coverage, one coat, most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And I absolutely adore them. So I try to incorporate, that's the word I'm looking for, a bunch of these acrylics into my piece as much as I possibly could. So here I'm using some of the green, darker green at the bottom. I'm using my reference off to the side. I don't follow it exactly. I do make some changes along the way, but I start with a little bit of dark green, and then I'm going to work towards other colors eventually. But first I spill a lot of green, and it goes everywhere, just so you know. And that's just always fun to clean up. So get that all cleaned up, wasted a good amount of paint, no big deal. It didn't cost me an arm and a leg. And now I move on to the next color. You can actually see I've actually added the top color in there off camera, but here I am adding the teal. Oh, so pretty, so pretty. But now they're just lines, and so I need to actually start blending them. Big thing about blending is it's all about, acrylics dry really fast, so you have to work being willing to use both colors at the same time. You gotta be working between the colors. And it's hard with a really, really light color, like the light color at the top and the dark green at the bottom. So you have to work quickly and also drying in between to get secondary passes or what you want to do. Here I am going back in and adding in the yellow-green to areas that were covered by my messy blending. Again, I don't mind. It's not a big deal. But now we're moving on to the orange. So the orange is actually one of my accent colors. I do use it for all the horns, all the spikes, the feet, the claws, and as well as the belly. I really want this color to pop, but it's not a primary color on this piece. I know it seems like the belly's pretty big and likely would be very visible, but the dragon's so close to the ground that you'll only see a sliver when it's actually on its stomach. Sitting on its feet, so it's actually quite minimally viewed, so the orange is intended to be strictly accent. However, going around all those spikes was a fun thing. Now going into the hair. So all this hair, there's actually 2 tones of very similar color greens to give a little bit of variance. But here I am just combing away with my pet brush and getting a very silky smooth hair or fur or whatever you want to call it. It does take a lot of effort and a bit of elbow grease, but here it is all fluffy and almost fully combed out. You can see there's a lot of extra, and I'll save that for another project. And now I'm going to straighten it with my really, really cheap straightening iron. Hey, but it does the trick. It's real good. And it is lovely. Going back to the dragon, I decided to need a little bit of wash to define the scales. This is a very dark purple wash. It's actually not in my color palette. It was a risk. It was a big risk doing that. I don't regret doing it, but I was very hesitant for a while. Now I'm going into dry brush to highlight these scales where the wash had accented the low lights. This is actually bringing up the highlights. I do go in with a bunch of colors. I'm actually using some like neon greens for the scales to tie in the main color into it. That's not a lot on this piece. You can see here I'm actually slowly adding just on the edges some of that color. I do think this is a really good idea to tie in that the yellow green more into the general piece. A little bit of touch-ups here with the orange, as well as I've decided to actually do a gradient. I do an opposite gradient to actually what is shown on my reference photo. I'm going from a dark orange up to a light orange. I actually use a cream for the light orange blended in, just so it looks like it's like kind of like hot. It looks hot. And I really like how that came out. I'm busting out my watercolor pencils to add a little bit more texture and life to it. But while I'm at it, I might as well add some other colors. Now the face was hard for me. I didn't want to just leave him as like the green blue. I did want to add some definition, so I actually do add some orange and other colors to the face. This has a very like ugly phase to it. I was actually regretting it at one point. I was like, did I make a mistake? I definitely come around. At this point, I wasn't sure, but I'm definitely feeling it already. Like, okay, it's coming along. I can see it working. But I also need to add a lot more. I started adding my pastels, mostly greens, and using other colors to kind of tie it in all together. The biggest thing is I had a distinct separation of the head from the rest of the body. So I needed to tie them in together. So bringing in more of those like lighter colors, bringing in some of the yellows, the greens, the yellow greens, I guess you would say, and the oranges, tying it all together. The watercolor pencils never get as vibrant as they need to, so I do eventually need to go in with paint. And here I am painting in the eyes. Well, the whites. Nothing else yet. But now I need to prepare the hair wefts. So I have my glue gun, my silicone mat, some extra glue sticks, and of course the hair. I put on my trusty silicone finger thingy that I make a weird worm gesture. Why not? And that's the idea of what I plan to do with the hot glue. And now I cut a tiny bit of the fur. I spread it out on my silicone mat. I lay it out nicely. And then I continue to pat it, because that's what you do. And I glob on some hot glue. Using the silicone thing, I pull it through. I actually do flip it over. I don't show it here, but I flip it over and do that on both sides. But these are what the hair wefts are going to look like. And so when they're done, I put them off to the side and I do the next batch over and over and over again till all the fur is done. But now that they're all completed, I can actually start adding them to the dragon. So here I'm using 3-in-1 glue. It's an acetone-based glue. Bentley House Minis actually called it the cold hot glue. Like a similar kind of thing. I've never used it before, so I got it. It's great. It worked really well for what I needed here. It was definitely not something I was used to, but I did make it work for this. It is stinky. Wow. Wow. Not enjoyable to use. I think I ended up putting on my mask, honestly. But here I am finishing up the piece, adding all the wefts. I think I actually had to make more, to be honest, because I want to actually like not make the wefts, but like blend in the hair a lot more. But oh, look, he's got a mane. It's really wild and I love it. So I have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, you can see the head is like separate from that. I need to actually blend the fur down. I do eventually do that, but I do need to trim it a little first. Oh, but not before I add on his beard hair. And now the extra to blend it in. Slowly but surely, I need to add all this hair into all the cracks and crevices so it actually looks all blended. He's got his beard and everything else. He was really thick at this point, and I didn't want to add a ton of fur to the bottom area here, so I decided to needle felt a bunch of the extra fluff and then just add a few wefts down there, just some skinny ones. It's not the best solution. I do like it better than not having anything at all, but maybe next time I will actually add some wefts to it. I think that's what I'll do, just some light ones. But here he is looking mighty fine. Look at that mane. Just look at it. So fluffy, so fluffy. And it's like directly attached to the bottom of his chin now and his like jawbone, and it looks like it's where it's supposed to be, and his head doesn't look detached anymore. But that's actually why I did the double spike. So you can see the mane goes all the way down the back. It looks just fabulous. And that was the intention right from the start. After some trimming, he is looking much better. I do have these scissors I actually bought specifically for this project. I had some old ones from the dollar store a long time ago, but I picked up some of the new ones that are a little bit better quality. Not a lot better. I think I picked them up in Walmart, but they are better quality than the ones at the dollar store, that I'm able to slowly just trim him down so it doesn't look like he's got like actual like cuts. I mostly succeed at that. His back fur definitely has a little bit more distinct cuts happening, but it does kind of look like spikes. So yeah, it worked out well. I'm pleased as punch, to be honest. Now I'm finally adding pupils. No wait, that's irises. Eventually I move on to pupils. So I'm adding a tiny bit of the orange and then a little tiny slit of black. There it is, there's the pupils. They're so tiny, so tiny. And yeah, he's looking pretty darn good, if I do say so myself. And finally, with my tiniest brush, I do a tiny little line to add a tiny itty bitty little eye white. And you can see it right there. It's so small, but it works really well. And with that, the dragon part of this project is done. I'm not done, but the dragon part is. So let's move on to the base. You know I couldn't go without making a base, and here I am recycling leftover PLA. Yes, I have a 3D printer. Yes, I use PLA, and I have no idea what to do with the scraps. I hate throwing them away. I've been keeping them. I don't do a ton of printing, so I don't have as many scraps as I potentially could have, but a lot of these scraps can be used, so I figured why not? I dug out all the small stuff, all the stuff that'd be easy to use, and I pulled it out to see what I could do. And you know what? I made it work. I'm just saying. So what I did was I used a heat gun on high heat, and I melted the pieces together. This is similar, I imagine, to like how Worbla works to some degree. Like as soon as you melt it, it becomes like formable and it kind of sticks to itself. So I'm able to actually like fully like melt it on. I don't try anything fancy. Literally, I'm just making a glob. I want it to be this shape. So the big round piece was actually from a castle, I think Castle Dice Tower, but I have all these other pieces I want to add. I just want to melt them in. I want them to look organic, nothing fancy. I'm using the silicone mat on top to press it down, as you saw there. And here you can see I've actually created some mounds, and I'm testing it with my dragon in between to make sure that I'm actually able to use it as some form of terrain. So I decided he's going to sit that way, and that's the way I want it. And I want to add a little bit more off to the side, and I do. So here you can see, after a little bit of adjusting, that I've actually added some blue even, and the base is pretty much done with all the 3D material. It's rock hard again, and it will work. I like how it looks. It definitely does look organic, but it's not organic enough. I do need to fiddle with it, and it is wobbly. It's probably all the reheating again, but I'll make it work. I'll make it work. And I do so with acetone. So here you can see I have some acetone in a jar. Here's my empty one. It's just a little bottle, also from Walmart. And here's another one, also stinky. Please wear a mask when dealing with this amount of acetone. I had a headache, and I was wearing a mask. So I have it in the jar, ready for a project that I don't show you here what I do, because I actually take advantage of it with my kids. But now, coming back from doing it with my kids as a science experiment, using some acetone glue, I lather on styrofoam. Oh, yeah, first I stick it to cardboard. That definitely stuck. I don't use the cardboard anymore. It's not a good idea. Just letting you know that. Don't do that. I use it just on my silicone mat moving forward, but it's okay. So here I am pressing it in. So what I did actually was I took pure acetone and I took a ton of styrofoam and I just slowly melted it in. We were outside on the deck. It was well ventilated. The kids weren't getting too close, but we were dropping in pieces of styrofoam and melting into the acetone. And I made it into some sort of foam clay, if you will. It was more like foam slime. It was like foam slime. Honestly, I put this on when it was way too goopy. I found that if I worked it a little bit more, it actually like was easier to work with. Like if you took it right out of the jar and put it on, you added a ton of extra acetone into it and it was a lot harder. And you can see it's kind of melting off, but it actually really does pull together the more organic look I wanted. The shape was good from the PLA scraps, but this is actually a little bit more natural looking. So here I'm pressing in my dragon to make sure that I have a spot for him to actually sit on. Here it is when it's dried. Now, this is probably not what would happen if you dried it naturally. I put it out on my outside and it was really hot. Like it was really hot outside and I think it remelted it a little. So yeah, I don't recommend that. But the bubbling gave it really great texture. Not my intention, I'll be honest, but it worked. Here I am, I covered it in gesso, black gesso this time, and now I'm adding some bright oranges and yellows. And originally I was thinking I'll make a terrain like I usually do, I'll add rocks and all that fun stuff, but this time, I don't know, once I had the form, especially after it was painted black, I'm like, magma. It's magma. This is now, the dragon has like a fiery, like talons or claws and horns and spikes. Even though he definitely looks more earthy because of his green color, I'm gonna have him standing on this magma looking piece, and I had a lot of fun. Like honestly, just mixing colors together like this to create something like this is like one of the funnest things. Especially with really good quality paints, you can have a lot of fun with it. I was just dabbing it on. I did not use really any black until the very, very end. I didn't want to. I added a lot of like purples and reds and oranges, and even I used pink a lot in this. It just changed how the orange looked. But yeah, eventually I do use some black to kind of highlight the darker areas to make it look like it's like drying or obsidian. I did try some crackle medium, did not work, but here I am really satisfied with it. It definitely looks the way I wanted it to, and it's where I want to take it. So I actually grabbed my hard coat Mod Podge. Oop, got a little bubble going on there. Up. And I now cover that, but it's too matte. So I actually will eventually add some gloss varnish as well, which I'm doing right here. Now you can see I have some pigment off to the side. I use glow pigment. It was awful and I actually had to cover it, but yeah, it looks pretty good now. And here it is finished. The base is done. It is looking, magma is glossy. The rocks are more matte from the hard coat. The dragon is done. He sits nicely on his magma patch, and I cannot overstate how happy I am at how well he came out. So let's move on to the glamour shots. And that's it. That's my dragon done. You know, I haven't given this guy a name. Citrus. His name is Citrus. Man, did he come a long way. I absolutely did not expect him to turn out the way he did, and scales. Oh, the scales. They look awesome. But yeah, that was my adventure and it's now done. So I hope you like them. Please let me know. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell notification button and let me know what you'd like to see me make next. Thank you very much and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.